Hi, I'm Harut Markarian, and this is Mobility and Inclusion, the show where we share the powerful stories of people with disabilities and daring entrepreneurs making waves in our world. From technological innovations to best practices in business, we'll learn what it really means to live in an inclusive and universally designed environment. Welcome, everybody. This is Mobility and Inclusion. I am Harut Markarian, and my guest today is the Metaphysical Consultant, the Clinical Counselor, and the Spiritual Healer, Dr. Anneli Driessen. Dr. Driessen is a scholar of metaphysics and practical philosophy for over 35 years. She is the founder and CEO of the International Metaphysical Academy in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, which she established 11 years ago. The Academy's mission is to facilitate high-level spiritual education for consciousness expansion through critical thinking, applied knowledge, personal responsibility, and love. Dr. Anneli has published many articles on spiritually related matters. Her book, Spiritually Based Leadership, 7 Keys to High Performance, extensively covers many energetic laws governing our lives. Dr. Anneli, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you.
It's a pleasure to see you as well. So Anneli and I were talking a few weeks back, and she asked if I wanted to know the spiritual meaning of inclusion. And of course, I jumped on the opportunity, having a doctor offer my audience a different explanation from what we're used to. Sounds like a great opportunity. But before we get into it, please, I want to ask if you can give us an overview of what metaphysics is.
Oh my goodness. Metaphysics is such a vast subject. If you look at it on the internet, you usually get it referenced as being a part of a philosophy. But of course, today it's a lot more. It has had quite a history, which we cover somewhat extensively in the Academy in the beginning to just get a framework. But really, in the last few years, probably even in the last century, we have attracted many scientists, many thinkers, many prophets even, many new ways of looking at life here and in the big scheme of things, life in the cosmos, life in the beyond, life when we're out of here, out of these physical dimensions. And so it's vast, it's exciting, it's so comprehensive, you can't even start to define it in 1 or 2 sentences. But in brief, I like to define it always as something that is mostly invisible to our human eyes. And we know that there are many other things in science that we cannot see, but we know they exist. And so there is just a lot of wonderful news for us out there to get us out of our maybe unhappy places that we are in, that particularly during the last year and a half, and look at a much broader perspective of what's happening to this planet and what choices we have as individuals getting through this time and making it better.
That's a great overview, and I resonate with a lot of things that you said, specifically in knowing what is out there outside of our physical dimension, right? And that's very interesting to me. So let's dive into the the show is called Mobility and Inclusion, and you offered me to explain the word inclusion. We know how, in my opinion at least, the word inclusion today has taken many meanings, most of which I disagree with, and I put that on the open. So what does the metaphysical consultant tell us about inclusion?
Probably the most easy or simple way to explain is that we are basically all souls, whether we are male or female or anything in between, what kind of color we have, what kind of level of intelligence we have or not, what kind of cultural background we have. In the end, we are all here to fulfill a specific learning task. And that is something I know about. It's not even something anymore I have to believe in. I just know that that's true. And oftentimes we experience individuals or even ourselves who go through different types of disabilities. And I know part of your life mission is to help those who are physically challenged, physically disabled. I know that's a bit of an outdated term, but it is a disability. And I thought this morning what I wanted to share with you, because I'm also a social worker. I studied social work. I'm a graduate social worker in Germany. Wow. And one of the exercises we once did was, it was volunteer, is to put ourselves into wheelchairs and drive through town, drive through the city. And that was very interesting, because one of the things I never ever imagined was how dismissed I was. People either looked right through me or next to me. It was like I didn't exist. And if anything, they maybe looked at the chair, but never eye contact, never or rarely ever a smile, unless I bought something in a store. And to be that dismissed was a totally new experience for me. And it was just fascinating. And I thought, you probably can relate to that with your contacts you have. And of course, part of that is discomfort. People don't like to deal with people who are different in some form or another. Yeah. And that's awkward and strange. And it's the easiest thing for people is to just avoid it. So that was one thing. And of course, part of that are all these judgments that people have, whether they may be really conscious or not so conscious. I don't know. But I want to share with you a story that I remembered after we talked a few weeks ago. And that is that one day I was in Cologne, where I studied, and I lived for 28 years in Germany before I immigrated to Canada. I was in the tram, these big cities like Cologne, they have these little trams that go all the way through. And one day I was just getting from university back home, and I was sitting there, and in front of me was this guy with 4 little kids. And they were so obnoxious. They were jumping around, they were screaming, they were climbing up those things, where you hold yourself. It was just, and I was just so indignant. I sat there with my righteousness, and I just kind of tried to hate wipe him and telepathically tell him to please get a hold of his kids to, calm them down and that they behave and all this. Mm-hmm. No, it didn't happen, but I think you must have noticed me. And at some point in time, I was still sort of, not very happily looking at him, very, very judgmental. He looked at me and said, they just lost their mother. And I sat there, I was so ashamed of my righteousness. And it was such an impactful experience for me that I remembered it many times when I was looking at someone or some group even with sort of disapproval. Maybe it didn't need to be discussed, but it was a feeling of, God, how could they? Or why would they? Probably. And so I thought of that and said, what do I know? What do I know what's going on? Yeah. And that, was a very, very powerful experience for me. I was in my 20s, in my mid 20s or so when that happened, but I've been thinking about it a lot, and it really impacted me in a way to realize that we don't know a lot of things about a lot of things, and certainly not people.
I absolutely, that I can 100% agree with you on that. I'm one who likes to develop myself a lot. I'm never resting on my existing knowledge, on the existing knowledge that I have. And time again, I found myself short of some other knowledge that would be beneficial for me if I were to know it at the moment, right? But I don't know, so I have to seek out. So that's correct. It's like a lot of things, there are a lot of things that we don't know. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's a human being trait or it's a characteristic that is born with us. We jump the gun on judging someone or thinking in a certain way. And, your story was very powerful to me, like right now hearing it, and when you said, oh, they lost their mother, I'm pretty sure that guy felt your energy, as his kids were doing whatever they were doing, and he felt the need to tell you that, or explain in some way why they were behaving that way. And I think that story can be a huge lesson for anyone listening to it, really. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. And to go back to the fact that you said we are all spiritual beings, right? And I 100% agree with that. When it comes to inclusion, and when we talk about inclusion, we're not talking about religion. We're not talking about sex. We're not talking about color. It's all of us are spiritual beings, and spirituality is not, in my opinion at least, is not defined by sex, color, race, right? Or religion. So why discriminate, resent, and form some type of judgmental opinions on others? So that's very powerful.
But here's an interesting thing, though. We have both, or we have many skills as humans. We also have a mind that we need to use, and forming good judgment is also part of our learning process. So, as a therapist, for example, I meet a person for the first time, and of course, instantly I have an impression and I form judgments. But with my further inquiry, I may change my judgments. I have a new judgment. And then I learn more, and I may change again or expand on what I learned. So it's always a dance between inquiring new data, forming a judgment, hopefully doing it as objectively as possible. And not everyone is capable of doing that, but we can learn how to be more objective, and then again stay open to more data, to more information. And that makes it really a conundrum in a way, because we have to use judgment. So to go around and say, don't be judgmental, that's right. But there is also a term in English language that judgmentalness always implies immediately a negative, whereas judgment in other languages, like in German, for example, is very neutral. Like we form judgments, and sometimes they are incorrect, and sometimes they're very helpful and right on. So it is a challenge for us to use that on a daily basis, and to be aware and self-aware, particularly to recognize, is it something that I'm projecting because of my issues that I may not have dealt with, or actually I know about, and there are buttons, so-called buttons or triggers for me to react to. So it's really an issue of a genuine attempt to be truthful to myself as well in the process. So inclusion for me, therefore, has a very broad dimension, to apply it for myself. And I'm certainly not perfect, absolutely not. But I'm working at it. I'm working at it. I can tell you that. And it is always a humbling experience.
I agree. I think you nailed it with that statement. It's a humbling experience to gather information, and even if, and you're right, we do form judgments. We do have judgmental ideas when we first meet someone. But I love also what you said about judgment being a neutral term, and versus having a negative definition attached to it, right? If we are aware that we are making a judgment, and we are aware, and we can choose to keep that neutral in our mind, then we open ourselves to wanting to know more and adapting with the information that we're getting. Now, talking about that, so when you in your practice in your academy, when you meet people, you said, you judge them right away, right? How often did you find that your initial judgment was the correct one?
That's a very good question. One of the things I learned is that often the very, very first impression is a correct one. And
That's
when I find out later on that I had an agenda, that I really wanted to like that person or really wanted this or that from this person, I realized that, I had an agenda of some sort. And whereas often my very first impression is one I can trust. But that is a learning process as well for me. And so my intuition is very, very strong, but my head is sometimes in the way.
Yeah.
That's, and it's the same with when I'm working with people in therapy. If I have an agenda that any agenda, it prevents me from being very present and really being open. And present is probably the best way. And I
being in the moment.
Yeah, and I catch myself again and again, when I do that. And the same is for healing. When I am doing healing work, I spend some time at the beginning to do my very best to neutralize all my judgment about that person, positive or negative, and just see this person as a part of God, and let go of anything else that I know about him or her, and just look at this essence of this individual that needs healing, and in that place, and then there are a few other processes I do mentally as well. I get sometimes some information that doesn't make sense to me, but when I share it, when I have permission to share it, it suddenly makes sense to them. and it doesn't often go out without a strong emotional response as well. So as a therapist, as a facilitator of the academy and founder, and as a healer, and I want to clarify, I don't heal anyone. I'm simply serving as a tool, and anyone who does healing work knows that. So I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just make myself available to the highest good and ask for and support help from the highest level, from God level. And I don't work with ascended masters or anything. I go directly to the boss, so to say. And funny. His highest helpers, and that's how I work, and it's very beautiful. And I always feel very privileged during the process and afterwards.
That's very interesting. You said that you view your patients as someone who's part of God, right? And you look at their essence. And these are, for me at least, these are very powerful words, because if you look at it from that point of view, you are putting all your subjectivity aside, all your ideas aside, and you're just focusing on what this person is really about. What is he struggling with? What is he good at? And then you, by going to the highest power, right? You're making yourself available to receiving information from the highest power and transferring it to your patient. And I think that's very powerful. I just have goosebumps talking about this stuff. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I was going to ask you about something you said earlier about it skipped my mind. Oh, about the agenda. You said when you follow an agenda, and it's like you kind of take yourself out of the moment, right? It's like you're no longer in the moment. And I feel that as well. I mean, simplest thing preparing to this podcast, I was going through, I'm going to ask this question, that question. And I'm like, yeah, but if I do all of this, I'm not going to be in the moment with my guest, So I rather me ask maybe the first question, and based on how you respond to it, take it from there. That way I'll be more engaged with you, and the show will be more valuable to the listeners.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important, being in the moment, being conscious, present. So I wanted to make that comment as well, because I felt that in my work as a podcast host or as anything else, if I usually I do agendas for various stuff, but when I'm with someone face to face, I don't like to follow an agenda because it keeps me from being in the moment and present with them.
It also is a lot less stressful. When we have
true.
an agenda, then you say, oh my God, I haven't done this yet. And I better, go there. And the viewers probably want to know X, Y, Z. And then we lose the momentum of being with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, your academy's mission, to facilitate high-level spiritual education for consciousness expansion through critical thinking, applied knowledge, personal responsibility, and love. These are all the traits that I have put as part of my company's mission statement, right?
Okay.
So that's why I resonate very strongly with these words. And I wanted, well, why don't you talk to us a little bit about, how do you define critical thinking in your field?
Well, critical thinking is, first of all, has become, again, more attractive now. You read more about it everywhere, particularly with all this of wrong information we are getting from all kinds of sites. But critical thinking is, for me, much also discernment, but it's also reading things and learning things and being really open to acquiring different knowledge about different points of view. One of the things I learned is that truth has no errors in it. So when things fit, you can be pretty certain that there is truth. But one of the things that is fed to us is that people say, well, everything is relative. It just depends on how you believe. No, that's not what I believe. I believe that truth is truth. And you just have to do your homework to figure it out. And so we share, for example, in the Academy, new information that has been transmitted by the Beyond, which I translated from German into English. And I share it and I say, well, look at it. If it makes sense, take it. If it doesn't, put it on a shelf, revisit it later and see if it fits. Because some of the ideas are really very different from what usually we learn. And depending on our religious background or our beliefs until today, it may be really challenging to adopt some of these concepts. And it takes a lot of courage. And so I always say, think it through and see if it applies, if it fits. And so there is no indoctrination, there is no dogma, there is none of that, but a very vast range of knowledge that we share. And then the critical thinking part is to really look through it and see if it makes any sense or if it is something that is applicable and potentially makes your life better. It is not about a feel-good spirituality, which is very common today, that people go and, meet with others and just have a sense of safety and community and are in some sort of a cocoon to block out the rest of the world. No, the Academy is very down to earth. It's very much related to what also is going on in this world, not just in the world and the beyond. And I know that this is my calling, to be available and to share this knowledge for anyone who wants it. And it's also not for everyone. People want to have short-term fixes and do a little bit here and there, and that's fine. But anyone who really wants to dive more deeply into the core of our existence and our true reason for being here, and also where we are going when we're out of here, they invest into themselves. And I tell you, it is mind-boggling. It is beautiful. I don't know what else I would rather do than being with those individuals who really make that commitment to themselves and their own spiritual journey, in their life journey here in this dimension.
That's really amazing how you, and that's very also important to all of us to find their true calling, the true purpose in for our existence, right? Because that's gonna make you a person who's ready to do good for humanity, ready to do good in your community. And a lot of the times people lack the vision or the purpose in their life. And well, if you do, now you have Dr. Anneli Driessen, you can go and she will do her best to help you figure that out.
Yeah, I should say, I'm sure you'll allow me to do this, but we start only a new class once a year. And the next one is not until September 18th. So it's very soon. So if people want to meet with me personally on Zoom or on any other virtual platform, we can do that. They can ask questions. They can check out the website, which is very simple, metaphysicalacademy.com, just one word, metaphysicalacademy.com. And I'm there to ask questions. And I tell you, if I don't have an answer, I tell you. I'm not invested in making up anything that again, with the agenda. If this is right for you, I support you in doing that. But I also promise you, I don't follow you around. I don't do tons of emails, follow up, and tons of phone calls and all that. I may do one, but that's it. And because we are adults, it's adult learning, and I don't believe in pushing anyone.
Also your mission statement also has in it personal responsibility, right? So that's part of it. And I think, I don't have personal responsibility in my mission statement, but I have accountability, which goes hand in hand, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's why. And the reason I like Dr. Driessen a lot is because the first time we met, she said exactly what she was saying right now. She said, if I don't know the answer to your question, I will tell you I don't know. So I'm not going to throw bullshit at you. So
it really is true. I'm very committed to that. And I have no problem with it. Why would I know everything? But I do know a lot.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. But even those of us who know a lot, it's very, talks about somebody's character, someone who knows a lot, yet has the courage to say, this part, I'm not too sure. I don't know, but we can maybe figure it out together. So that's what's powerful. And that's what makes me think at least I'm in the right place, So check it out, metaphysicalacademy.com. Is that correct?
Yes. Metaphysical.academy.com.
And the new classes start September
18th. We always meet on Saturdays. From 10 to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then we meet about once a month, and one module is about a year. So it's a lot. And you get study materials, you can get quizzes. It's also very fast paced. When people hear 5 hours of program, they go, no, I go to sleep. No, I absolutely guarantee you, we have frequent breaks and you won't go to sleep. Too much happening and too much fun too.
Yeah. No, I it's like this one, I didn't come in here with an agenda, and I'm having the time of my life. We're having very meaningful conversation. I think more meaningful than any other nonsense that is going on around us these days.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about consciousness a little bit, and you're helping people basically expand their consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to give us and our viewers, listeners, a tip on how to expand your consciousness, what would you say?
Well, let me just say what people often think consciousness is. They usually stay on a very peripheral level, that it has to do with knowledge. And yes, knowledge is a part of it, but the consciousness that we are talking about, consciousness expansion and spiritual consciousness, is that and more. But it's also something that people often forget, and that's action. Consciousness expansion is not just a cerebral activity. It is something that needs to be internalized, it needs to be felt, it needs to be practiced. And so there are some invitations for activities that we have to do between the classes. And they're invitations, because it's adult learning. You do what you get out of what you put into it. And also participate in those little activities, expand their awareness and their self-knowledge quite a bit. And that's part of consciousness expansion. The other part is that there are different levels of consciousness expansion, and we talk about also those, which I don't go into now, but there are different levels of consciousness expansion. And consciousness expansion, again, has to do with humility. We don't sit on our high horse and say, well, I got it now, I have all the knowledge. It's knowledge with a paradox, humbling experience that we still don't know.
Yeah,
a lot of things.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
this is just a few comments on consciousness expansion or consciousness, but there is a
yeah,
lot more to it.
absolutely. And I have, high beliefs into expanding the consciousness. It's like when I was reading your mission statement, it was like it hit home for me. Was because it talked about love. Love. It's like, give us your. I think love is the most important thing. Right? We don't talk about that. Let's hear about love from the metaphysical consultant.
That's just another one of those things that millions of poets have written about, music has been written about, books have
But no
been
one is taking action.
everything. So it's just everyone just talks about love, and everyone who explores it knows there are different kinds of love. And so because I was also stuck on that, and we spent, by the way, 2 full days just on the subject of love, and we cover prostitution and I mean, you name it, any kind of angle of all of that love, brotherly love, and you name it. But so I asked the Beyond, can you give us a short, succinct definition of love, because I'm overwhelmed. I don't know anymore. It's romantic love and parental love, and I mean all this stuff. And the answer was, love is both. It's consideration and holding the other person in high regard. Consideration and holding the other person in high regard. And so I thought, that's sort of too simple. But then I think it through. And, when I'm sort of mad at my husband, or I'm, something going on, is it, we all have that, even in the best marriages. I think, Anneli, I said to myself, I said, is that considerate of you? Are you considering what is going on there? And do you hold him in high regard? And I said, no. Not right now, But then I think about it, and it serves me as a little path to rethink where I'm with him. And yes, I do hold him in highest regard. I trust him. He is a phenomenal person. That's why I married him, right? We married each other. And was I really considerate and need to be considerate? And so that's a very simple thing that works for me. And I know there are many other ways of going about it, but that was amazing. Consideration.
Let me ask you here. You said you ask yourself if you're being considerate of him, or for example, me, I ask myself if being considerate of her, right? So what if the other party is not being considerate as well in the same time? Because you can't have it one way, right? So how do you fix or mediate the situation there?
Well, it's a matter of agreement. We obviously married each other, and we wrote our own vows. We married just recently, 3 years ago, and consideration was part of it, and we discussed it through. And so, for example, if he gets impatient with me, which he does, particularly when it has to do with any technical issues which I really don't have much understanding of. And he's a genius. He's a computer genius. He really is, and he gets very frustrated with me very quickly because I don't get it, or I don't see something or so. Then what usually works is that when he comes down, that we sit together and I tell him again, I have a lot of other strengths, but this is not one of them. and ask him to understand, be patient. Usually it works. Well, it really always works. We're still together, right? And happily married. But it's also reminding my best friend, my husband, to be considerate of me. And it, again, as I said, it's a matter of permission. You cannot do that with everyone. But to open a dialogue when things have calmed down is the way to go. It's not in a heated moment, because then there's no room, no space, because it's charged with emotions and blockages and resistance. All these wonderful things that we all probably know about. But it is also a method for us to clean things up again, or to be back together again, 100%. Does that make any sense? But it's a permission thing. You wouldn't necessarily do that, or even need to do that with everyone else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was great. I think anyone in a relationship today can benefit from that advice, because it is all about consideration. It is all about holding your partner in the highest regards, right? And understanding each other and agreeing with each other, agreeing that I have a shortcoming and you have a shortcoming. Let's find a medium way to, you know, put our differences aside and agree on a path forward.
But it's also, Haru, it's also something that applies to strangers. I know I just limited it to my husband now, maybe my closest friends. But to hold someone in the highest regard is a spiritual perspective on the soul. You know, something we talked about at the very beginning, that even though I may not like this or that, or can not relate at all to some people, or would rather not have lunch with them. I always say that I don't need to hate someone, but people I really don't want to spend any time with. It still doesn't mean that on another level, I release that and say that for whatever reason, I don't know, this individual is also a part of our Creator and has a particle of our Creator inside him or her. And
that's actually, I thank you for bringing that up. I know I limited I limited what you were saying to only relationships and married couples or boyfriend, girlfriends, or whatever. But it is very true what you just said about we have a relationship with literally everyone we meet during our day. And some of those relationships we're not very happy about. But if we think of it, as you said, as an extension of our Creator, right? Then our perception should change and will be changed in terms of viewing this person who I don't like to spend time a lot with. Now I have a different way of thinking about his existence in front of me, right? And take a different approach in speaking to him and dealing with him. So that's very powerful. Thank you for highlighting that part of it, because I mean, we want it or not, we are dealing with people we don't like.
It's more often. Just the way it is, yeah.
Yeah. So it is good to know that every one of us is an extension of our Creator, and there's good in everyone. It's just a matter of finding that good.
And sometimes, we don't need to try to find it either. It's a release. And what comes to mind as we're talking is, the issue of freedom is very much in the forefront now of people thinking. I was virtually part of the Freedoms Fest that the C-Suite network
that's good.
organized. And so freedom is such a burning yearning and desire now. And I'm thinking, if I manage to let go of my negative judgments of people, or just acknowledge even that there are certain people in my life that I would rather not be with, it sets me free. There is a different type of freedom. I mean, we're talking mainly now about political freedom. I'm talking about inner freedom. And inner freedom is something that I'm acquiring, and I want to become a master at. And there are steps to do that. And of course, we also address that ultimately in the Academy, which is so beautiful to watch when people get stronger. And it's an outdated word. I never even use it, but it comes to mind as an empowerment. But I don't empower anyone; they empower themselves. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just facilitating some information and support you, and do the best I can do to validate you and all that, and that makes a difference.
You saying that I'm not empowering anyone, I'm just facilitating, and you are empowering yourself. That's just huge, and actually, in my mind, gives you a lot more credibility than the PhD in front of your name or after your name, whatever you place it, right?
But when I finished my first PhD, what my first thought was? I thought, God, what if anyone finds out I don't know anything? And it's not a joke. I really thought that, I just thought, God, I just fooled all of them, with my oral exam and all that stuff. If they just would know that I don't have a clue, I would be in big trouble.
I definitely feel you on that, because I have 3.5 degrees, so I have a minor somewhere in there, right? And I look at it right now. I'm like, some challenges rise up, and I'm like, how did I get my degrees? It's like, in order for me to do this, I have to go back, hit my books, or research something else. So I'm like, I always feel like I'm in a constant evolution of a constant self-evolution, right? So it's always a learning process. It's always a learning process. It never ends. So sometimes I wonder myself, I don't have a PhD, but I have, 2 masters and whatever, right? And I'm like, how did I get these degrees sometimes, like I don't even remember half of the things that I studied. So it really resonates that with me. And it's again, we come back to humility, right?
Yeah, but it's still good to have it, because I always say it has really not much to do with intelligence, because pretty much we are on a very similar level of intelligence, and we can learn how to write this stuff. It's a process, you over time, you just kind of get the hang of it and know how to do it. But what it does say is that someone had the perseverance to hang in there with this complicated task. And that, I think, is a good trait. If it's any other trade, any other professional that you acquire that and that gives you some certification or some degree, shows that you're capable to focus and to finish something. And that's a good human trait to have. And in that sense, I think it's a valid thing to have. But other people have mastery in other skills. They know how to, I don't know, like Bill, my husband, fixes computers, or someone else has, I don't know, a special skill to fix complicated watches. I don't know. I mean, there's tons of stuff. And so it does have validity to acquire a certification of some sort, or yeah.
Absolutely. No, there it is. And with that, we come to the end of our show. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Anneli Driessen, you shared some powerful knowledge on mobility and inclusion. And I want to leave with just a statement and see what you think about it. The simple fact is that we create our tomorrow by the way we live today. And we live today ruled by our every thought and action. For this reason, the journey to health, happiness, peace, and prosperity is different for each one of us. However, the destination is most worthy of our efforts. Do you agree with that?
In part. And again, it would require a little bit longer conversation, because there is a difference between our free will, our fate, and our destiny. And there is our karmic aspects as well. So, but again, that is something we also cover in the academy. So there is more to it, but in principle, that sounds really good, what you're saying. And I think it also would guide us to take full responsibility and accountability in what you're saying, in participating 100% in our journey.
Absolutely, it does. And of course, I'm just sharing my 2 cents. Dr. Anneli Driessen is far more qualified than I am. So check out her upcoming class in September the 18th, right?
Yes, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. The class starts September the 18th. You can get in touch with her, metaphysicalacademy.com, right?
Anneli at metaphysicalacademy.com. You can reach me directly.
Cool, perfect. So there you have it. Her email is Anneli at metaphysicalacademy.com. Please reach out to her if you want to know more about yourself, if you want to live outside of your mental limitations. And this is Mobility and Inclusion. I'm Harut Markarian. I'll see you next time with a different guest.
Great. Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.